On Tuesday, January 7th, the Taconic and Green Regional School District's Board of Directors adopted a budget proposal that calls for about $33.5 million for the coming fiscal year, a roughly 4% increase over their current budget. Now it will be up to voters to approve or reject the proposed budget at the school district's annual meeting, which will be held at the Dorset School on February 25th. Board directors had a robust discussion of their budget at the meeting before giving it the thumbs up.
What it comes down to is you have to cut the budget.
Is it a fair number to focus on, or is there a better focus as we seek to convince the voters that A, we're being fiscally responsible, B, that we're offering appropriate programs, and C, that we're looking for savings wherever we possibly can?
Much of the upward pressure on the budget came from changes in the health care benefits for the teachers and support staff. The board and the teachers union had submitted differing plans to a state arbitrator, who sided with the teachers union. While the district has allocated an additional $112,000 to cover that, the actual amount could be much more, but that won't be known until the teachers and staff make their selections for insurance coverage. A reserve fund, left over from last year's budget, will also be deployed to help narrow the gap. School Superintendent Jackie Wilson explained some of these changes in a follow-up interview.
So the decision was made last year. The governor supported it, moving to negotiating health care for teachers at the state level, and that was supported through the legislature. So we were compelled to do that, and the School Boards Association and then the NEA went into negotiations on healthcare, but the healthcare was negotiated not just for teachers, but for all support staff, anyone associated that's working in an educational system, K to 12 in the state. So they were unable to reach agreement, so it went to an arbitrator, and then the arbitrator's decision came down on, it was right before December 15th, which had been the deadline. So for us, we're still chewing on that. We still have some. Next week, we're going to another training from the SBA to get more details on that settlement. But we understand the main components of that, and where it's really hitting us is at the support staff level. So it has now, through the settlement, it's opening up all tiers of health care. By that I mean you can have a single, you can have a two-person, you can have a family, and that all of those tiers of health care will now be open to all support staff. And they don't have to be year-round employees. It's that if they, school year 17 and a half hours, meeting those IRS rules as when they come under the contract. So that is incredibly challenging for us. We have offered health care, but we have not offered family plans until you've worked with us for, I believe it was 5 years before you had access to that. No, access for a two-person at 5 and access to a family at 10 years. So that's a big shift for us.
Other major changes include creation of a new position which will oversee complaints and concerns about bullying, hazing, and harassment, and a trimming of the general education, kindergarten through 8th grade expenditures by about $164,000.
Well, there is, Vermont has on its books pretty stringent law around hazing, harassment, and bullying, and how the investigation should happen and how that whole process needs to unfold. It's very, very scripted. It is, I'd argue that it really goes way beyond policy. It is very detailed procedure. And they're down to even, this is what the content of, when you communicate with folks, how you communicate, the timeline in which you'll communicate, what triggers an investigation, what your response needs to be. It is incredibly complicated. And our staff goes to, every year we go to trainings and we get up to speed on that. But as you can imagine, it is a place that is just very, very litigious, and it is not something that that any of us anticipated in our careers that we would be at that level of expertise, though we've gotten there. But what I'm seeing in my two, especially the two larger schools in Floodbrook and Manchester, a lion's share of the principal's time is spent doing those investigations. And that responsibility has fallen to them. And it's really, I have watched through last year and through this year, we've really tracked it the first few months of the year because our focus had been on really increasing their ability to provide instructional support and leadership and to get into classrooms more, and it has really been a barrier to their ability to do that.
The district is also wrestling with coming up with a pre-kindergarten offering that's affordable and equitable across the district. Right now, pre-kindergarten services for 3- and 4-year-olds are offered at the Courier Memorial School in Danby and at the Manchester Elementary Middle School. After an extended discussion, the board settled on a proposal put forward by Superintendent Wilson. In that, she recommended covering up to 20 hours per week for 4-year-olds at private providers, while keeping the 5-day-a-week program for 4-year-olds at MEMS, as well as the program at Courier, which runs 4 days a week. Again, it was a lengthy and at times passionate discussion.
I mean, I'm just going to say what's on my mind because that's what I do, and I basically think that Rachel has an agenda to keep pre-K going on in Manchester, and she's willing to do anything possible to get us to vote in her favor. And I basically disagree with everything she says. I mean, this is just getting to be ridiculous. Amendments upon amendments, and I just don't really feel like it's genuine. I don't really feel like she's thinking about it, all our kids being all our kids. I think she has promises made in Manchester, and
I'm not going to disagree that this issue affects me, and as somebody who is affected by it, I have knowledge of how difficult it is to live in a district that continues to make wish-wash decisions about programming that are available to students. That is a problem for families throughout our district. That is why we held a public forum on this issue. That is why people drove through a snowstorm to attend it, because it's an issue that affects people throughout this district. And it's a problem because we merged several districts and people want what was available to everybody. And it should be that way. We had good programming in our districts, that's why we merged, and now all people want are what was available to people already.
Another factor putting pressure on the budget is the rising cost of secondary education. The Taconic and Green District does not operate its own high school, and instead pays out tuition to receiving secondary schools. That cost is anticipated to rise about 7%, representing about half the 4% overall budget increase the Taconic and Green Board is looking at. A 4% hike was a concern for Dorset resident Jim Miranda, who addressed the board near the start of the meeting.
I see spending per pupil up 6.5%. Point of reference, last year that was up 2.7. Inflation's up roughly 2. I know as a taxpayer I'm not going to vote to support a budget that's up 6.4% on student spending, or spending per pupil. So roughly half of the increase in spending is coming from healthcare. I know there was a state decision made, you outlined that in this budget document. There's also enormous premium increases. So I think, what as a taxpayer am I getting for the additional $500,000, or everybody else in this room, probably a taxpayer in this district? I don't think students are getting anything for the extra $500,000 in spending. I don't think staff, I don't know the intricacies of their healthcare benefits. I don't think they're getting much, or probably not losing much, so I'm going to call that a wash. Taxpayers are out $500,000. The only people who are winning from what I see that extra $500,000 is the healthcare industry, and I'm not happy about that.
But other school district boards are coming in at even higher than 4%. The neighboring Southwest Vermont Supervisory Union, for instance, is looking at a nearly 9% increase, where again, health insurance costs are among the main drivers. For the GNAT-TV News Project, I'm Andrew McKeever.